Hi.
Hey.
I'm
Good.
excited. Yeah, I've been waiting for like what, 3 hours, 4 hours to get on screen. So I'm super excited to be here and see everyone live. I'm welcoming Wendy to this little fireside chat that we're going to do. Wendy, I'll have a few questions for you. But I do feel like if you can kick us off with your intro, that would be a
Okay.
good start. And then I'll ask you questions and I'll maybe add, if I have any experience on my end related to just this idea of hiring and growing virtual practices. So I'll kick it off to you, Wendy, to introduce yourself. Tell us about Diabetes Digital and everything else that you do.
That sounds great. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Wendy. I'm the co-founder and operating officer of Diabetes Digital. I've been a dietitian for close to 10 years now, and my clinical focus has always been diabetes care. Previous to Diabetes Digital, which we launched in January, my best friend Jess and I had another business together because we co-founded Diabetes Digital together as well. And that was called Food Heaven. And we did spokesperson work, brand ambassadorship. We did a lot of recipe development, and we did that for over 10 years. And that business did very well, but we decided to phase it out because we didn't want to be as visible online. It was really burning us out, especially just becoming older and just being in the field for a while. We wanted to do like more behind the scenes work. So we launched Diabetes Digital, and that is a startup diabetes telehealth platform. We specialize in diabetes care. We also see people with prediabetes, PCOS, any form of insulin resistance. And we currently have 3 full-time dietitians. We have 2 part-time. We have a full-time admin and biller. And our goal over the next 5 years is to build the team to 50 dietitians. And we also offer Spanish speaking nutrition care.
Incredible. I can just add to that, like the point of this session today is how to be competitive for these virtual nutrition spots. And, your goals of saying you want 50 dietitians on your practice, that's a very real and attainable goal for you because of this change we've seen in insurance-based nutrition counseling, where it can be covered. Your practice takes insurance, I believe, right?
Yes, we
Yeah.
do.
So it's just been incredible to see this growth. And the reason we wanted to have this session too was because these are going to be jobs that entry level or early stage career dietitians are going to be able to get. They're going to have more opportunity to work for a private practice and maybe, start their own later on in their career if they wanted. But there's going to be these jobs available. And the point of today is like, well, how do we prepare new dietitians to get these jobs? So my first question then is like, what do you look for when you're hiring? Like, what traits or values, or what are you hearing in interviews that makes you think like this is going to be a great fit for Diabetes Digital?
Yeah. Well, we practice from a weight inclusive lens, which is very unique in diabetes care. And so it is important that the dietitians that we bring on either have experience practicing from a health at every size approach, or they're open to learning, because we don't want to promote like restrictive dieting or intentional weight loss. And that is actually quite hard to find, like having someone that has a diabetes background and that practices from a weight inclusive approach. And we also want to provide culturally competent care. So we want to make sure that our clinicians are committed to learning more about how to serve the needs of a diverse population, because our clients are very diverse. And we do provide trainings upon hire. So we have professionals that come on and do trainings on cultural humility, health at every size, intuitive eating. And we also offer trainings on like more advanced diabetes care, because many dietitians, myself included, when I was starting off, I didn't feel comfortable with things like injectables, the different medication classes, like understanding the newer meds on the market. Now I'm a diabetes educator, so I'm a little more comfortable with those things, but I can see how that's like very overwhelming for someone who doesn't have years and years of experience. So we try to provide that training and supervision to, just provide like professional development too.
Sure. So do you feel like if you're considering someone that's newer in the field, like what kind of experience are you hoping that they would at least get, maybe as students or, as new dietitians before they're applying to a role at your company?
I would say definitely working with clients outside of like the typical 10 to 15 minute like clinical visit, like
Mhm.
someone who can hold a conversation with someone, because our visits are an hour. So you really have to fill that time. And that's why I think it's important to have some experience just going a little deeper and exploring things like body image and people's relationship to food, because we have a very ambitious retention goal. And so we want to make sure that the clinicians that we have are people that, you know, I would want to have a conversation with, that our clients would be like really excited to have a conversation with. So that is really the biggest thing. And, you know, sometimes that is a personality thing. Like, you know, for some people, it's just a little harder to like talk to them for longer periods of time, especially if you're newer to the field and you don't have that experience. I think some people are just stronger in that area than others. But I think it's also a skill that you can develop with, you know, just talking to more people, and maybe people that you are not used to talking to, and just kind of like approach it with curiosity, like, what can I learn about this person?
I love that. So as my quick background as well, so I have a group practice, virtual practice. We're not specific to diabetes, but we do take insurance as well, and are trying to grow it, and feel like there's such a huge need for nutrition that's covered by insurance. But when I'm hiring, it's like, I agree with you, the soft skills of being able, even in the interview, it's like, well, you're walking in, you've never spoken to me before. How are you going to handle maybe the questions, but also just can you build rapport at the beginning of the interview? Like when I ask you, how was your weekend? How was your weekend? If you say good, it's probably not. Or,
Right.
like, so just as a tip to those that are maybe going into these interviews, and I am interviewing a lot of people, will get into the fellowship I'm doing later on, but going in, and I kind of, that's like right away. I need to know if you can build rapport, just like how you would if you're going in to build a relationship and build trust with a new client, that you can have that human connection. So I like what you said there, but then yes, it can be learned. So, but that might be something that they need to do on their own, put themselves into situations where they're doing that. Like, people will say like food service, could be like, why do I need food service or anything? But I remember that being the place where I spoke to the most people on a day-to-day basis, and learned a lot of communication skills beyond, like my shorter clinical rotation. So you can find places to get better at communicating, not just in clinical or in an outpatient rotation, but even in food service, for example, just people skills, right? So.
100. Yeah.
Yeah. So then my next question, think about like kind of that ideal candidate or dietitian that you've recently brought onto your team. What impressed you, or like what were you excited to learn about or experience with them before you hired them?
Um, Well, I would say if they have a diabetes educator credential, that is great, or someone who is working towards that, because our focus is diabetes care. So having the CDCES is always very impressive, because a lot of people don't have it. And also just like having that intersection of like, okay, you have the diabetes certification, but then you also have some background with um, cultural competence, like all those things. They are unique skills, like, because we interviewed so many people, and it is quite hard to like find
Mhm.
that. So that was very impressive for us when going through candidates. And it's like, you know, sometimes you find someone who is like, typically diabetes educators are very clinical.
Mhm.
Uh, and so they don't really have, you know, as much of the soft skills that you mentioned. It's very like insulin dosing and like, you know, trying to like coordinate care, and so yeah, it's just very hard to find. And I think maybe we found one person who had like all three. And at that point we were like, okay, well, it's important to be flexible, and also go for people who have that motivation to maybe like pursue that credential or like learn about, you know, this approach. And so we hired like a good mix of people that had different backgrounds, so that they could learn from each other as well, since, you know, we function very much as a team.
Mhm.
um but also like someone who has like the mental capacity, because again, with the sessions being longer, you really have to be present. It's not just like giving recommendations. You have to be very present, and that could be draining emotionally. And so having like a full-time job, for example, like that, was an immediate disqualifier, because we found that it would just be, and we did hire someone who had a full-time job, but we found that it was like they would just get so stressed out because they're working so much. And then you have this other job that is quite demanding, like emotionally. So now we require having at least 20 hours of availability and not having a full-time job. Um, but yeah, I mean, those were like the most basic things that really stood out for us. And yeah, you would think, I mean, I don't know, maybe people are like, oh, well, that's not really too hard, but it is. It's a challenge to find someone who's like the good fit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a very similar experience with that. And I came to the same conclusion where, something like it's a heavier lift. I mean, any job can be a heavy lift depending on how you think about it, but that one-on-one care where you're trying to show up for the first patient of the day with the same amount of energy and attention and care as the last person of the day. And to be able to like have the passion and like the motivation to do that and take care of yourself along the way is really key. Something I'll add to, in that search, or at least for applicants, like one thing I felt like they have made a mistake on is they will feel like maybe they've just gotten their first job in clinical, and then they're, 6 months in or a year in, and then they're like, I want to make the switch to private practice. So
Yeah.
what will happen though, and of course they will have skills and like you said, be able to contribute to the team, their own situation. But what I've found the mistake that they will make when they kind of present themselves to me is they will I'll get the conclusion that they are running away from clinical, not running towards private practice. And I think that's a really important thing to applicants, that you really want to prove that you have a passion for that one-on-one patient care, and it's not because it's not clinical. So I think that has come up a lot in interviews, that I want to tell people you have to make a case for why you really want to, be sitting in your virtual practice, why you really want to be sitting in front of a Zoom or, HIPAA compliant platform and having 5-6 hours, depending on, your caseload every day, talking to people and helping them through these appointments. That's the job. So that's something that I've found. And then, some people might not know for sure that they want private practice, just like anyone. And early on in your career, this is all exploratory. So if they can get even the shadowing, or, that still does have value, where they actually know what the job, like, what does that really look like day to day? I think that was important, that I needed to hear that from them. But
Yeah.
anything to add on that, or have you experienced that or felt that?
Yeah, that's such a good point, because personally, I like clinical better than private practice as a clinician, because I'm more of an introvert now that I'm older. And I just get completely weighed down by having to like talk to someone for that long and like go into those deeper topics. It's just like it weighs heavy on me. And clinical, I find to be a lot more straightforward. The sessions are shorter, you're going over goals, you're not getting into like all of that stuff. And I'm a big empath too, so I feel like I just kind of like take a lot of that on, and I've done both, and my preference is 100% clinical now. And that's why when we initially started the company, we were like, oh well, should we also take clients, or should, because financially too, it's like it made sense for us to start seeing clients ourselves first. But Jess was burned out by doing her own private practice, and I was like, I'm not touching private practice myself, because I already knew that I would get burned out quickly. And we decided like we're just going to make the investment and hire, so that we're not doing it ourselves, because we really want to do more of like the organizational, the strategic side of things, especially because we've been in the field for so long. But it's not for everyone. It's way harder. It's so much more intense. So it's definitely something to think about. It's a really good point.
Yeah. So are you saying that's more intense, like your role now, or are you saying like the private practice role? You feel
No,
like,
the private practice role. Yeah, I mean, this is intense as well, but I enjoy it, and
Mhm.
it aligns with like my strengths. So it doesn't, like I want 1000%. I feel like I'm doing exactly what I need to be doing right now in my career. It's something that I really enjoy. It's intense, but in a good way. But I think that if I were doing like private practice myself as a clinician, it would be intense in a bad way.
Right. Like it's just
I would
not
be over.
aligned. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not aligned. And I think that's a really good distinction because there is kind of this I don't know, like narrative or perceptions around private practice, right? And you can do it a lot of different ways now. You can work and get hired for a private practice. You can go on your own, but maybe as a contractor for one of those bigger companies, where they do your billing and everything. And that's kind of that middle. And then you can go full on and maybe grow your own team or see clients and do the business side, knowing that only half your time is going to be it'll be more half and half, like half business, half counseling. And so I think it's a good reflection to think about as you're making the decision to apply to these types of jobs. What are your values and strengths that really align? I feel like in the interviews, I'm sort of mentoring them too. I'm like, is this really what you want? Like, are you more drawn to the business side? Are you drawn to like going and finding referrals from doctors and creating relationships there, doing or like mentoring or training a team? Or are you really into the patient care? I think that is a choice that maybe you have to do both early on in your career to find out. But you found out through your journey. Yes. And I did as well. I did one-on-one early on in my career for like 5 years. The first 5 years did sports, which wasn't really one-on-one. It was sort of everything. And then came back around and I don't see clients. I wanted to do the business side. So, and grow the team. But yeah. So anyways, going back to these questions then, were there any things we're going to get into like interview tips now? So are there any things that you feel like applicants can do outside of the interview to increase their chances, knowing, I mean, I'm sure you've gotten well over 100 applications. I'm not exactly sure. I know that everyone wants these types of jobs right now, virtual, flexible, whatever. What have you seen the candidates do maybe outside of the interview to really stand out?
Yeah. I think what can help, which we were a new company, so there wasn't much research to be done. But I feel like when we do our second round of hiring, I think it's definitely going to stand out if someone does research on the company and they can bring innovative ideas for things that they can do to make the company better, especially for us since we're a startup. Like we're very open, we're not rigid like some of these older companies or corporations,
Mhm.
clinics, so we're always like very open and we're kind of like sponges, like we're ready to soak up anything that might help push the company forward. And one of our dietitians actually came to us with so many great ideas. She was one of our part-time dietitians and she was like, well, these would be good ideas for expansion. This is how I can be a part of it. And just like practically speaking, like these are the things that I can do to help push that forward. And we wanted to invest in her. She also was just like a very strong clinician. Like her retention was incredible and like all of her clients loved her. And so we ended up making her a full-time offer, which thankfully she accepted. But, this is someone who I definitely feel will grow with us and hopefully we can promote to a leadership role as we continue to grow. So I think that innovation is really important, especially for private practices that are trying to scale up. If you're trying to have, I don't know, maybe like 5 clinicians or 10 clinicians, then I think it's definitely very doable now with insurance coverage and things like that. But if you're trying to scale and have something that's much larger, then you really have to be innovative and just stay up to date with everything that's happening.
Mhm. Right, absolutely. And yeah, I think with like a newer dietitian or maybe they've had a few years of experience, they come to the private practice, they will end up just like wanting to continue patient care to keep their foot in the door and like be maybe a good trainer or manager. But then there are other roles within the practice that you can get involved with, and to kind of like split your time. So you kind of get this benefit of where you don't have to be just doing the same thing over and over. I do think the repetitions and building up your hours of patient time is important when you're early on. You want to have as many as you can, to grow and to improve your skills. But yeah, there's plenty of other places to grow in a private practice, whether you're managing, training, business development, behind the scenes, practice management. Like I have 3 full-time dietitians and they all have like an additional role. So they don't do the typical, what would be for a full-time, maybe like 25 to 27 visits a week. So then it's lower based on their other roles that they have.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we're similar. Because we recently promoted a few of our dietitians from part-time to full-time, but it takes a little bit of time to kind of build up the caseload as you open up the hours. So we decided to do the same thing, like, just assign like administrative things that they can do, doing like business strategy, outreach, like all those things. Because there's so many things that you can do. And also that helps you identify what someone's strengths are. So yeah, we're doing something similar.
Right. Everyone has multiple strengths, and it's like the one-on-one care is just one piece of it. And then how can you use them as many as you can in a job that makes it more fulfilling, less burnout, and yeah, all good things for a team. We are getting a lot of really good questions in here, but I just have one more, and I think someone asked this as well, and then we'll get to the questions. And oh, actually two. So can you share a couple questions that you ask in an interview to your to like potential applicants?
Yeah, we do role playing, which is fun. So we will give certain scenarios that are tied in with our philosophy. So some of the scenarios are like practicing from a weight inclusive lens, like what would you do in this situation? Also just like diabetes knowledge, questions about things like hypoglycemia, or how would you navigate this person on injectables, like things like that. And I really like that because you get insights into like someone's counseling approach, and also just like their clinical knowledge. Um, we asked a lot of practical questions, just like what do you currently have going on right now? What are your goals as a dietitian within like the next year, within the next 5 years? What do you hope to get out of this position? But like that aside, we also just try to have a conversation to see like, is this someone that we would enjoy talking to, that our clients would enjoy talking to? So yeah, we do a few interviews. Like we have our assistant do the initial interview just to see like if all of the prerequisites are there to then move them onto an interview with us.
That's great. That's a great system. I'm winging it over here on dietitians, but I have found, just to add to that, I think the role playing is really cool. We asked that in like their initial application, so they just write it down, but I think doing it live would be even better. But we have like more of a coach approach, where and I think how you were saying, like to have that retention, right? So we do like 12 weekly visits with the client. That's our program. And so I'll end up like just, I mean, 10 times out of 10, no one's had experience doing that as a dietitian. Like it's just rare to have that kind of setup. But it would be just related to like, well, like put yourself in that situation, not knowing anything, like how would you design a 12-week program for that person? Or like, how would you, like an educational roadmap or something that you would take them through and coach them through. That usually helps me know if they sort of have that creativity that would be needed as go on with someone. And then I also ask, what or what would you find most challenging about this role? So it's a different way maybe of asking like their weakness, but it gets me to understand like what's scaring them about this role. And sometimes if they're like, well, I think I really miss in person, and like it'd be hard to be virtual. I'm like, oh, so it kind of can help me uncover like where it maybe isn't a good fit for people, and explore it, right? Like ask a follow-up question. But yeah, those would be some that I've asked. And then what do you think are important questions for candidates to ask at the end of an interview? Has any of those come up?
Yeah, people have asked really good questions. I think good questions to ask could be about like just the company culture, team dynamics, because we do work a lot together. Sometimes we have the dietitians meet with each other to come up with, different projects and things like that. Um, what are the goals that you have for my position within the first 6 months so that you have realistic expectations about what that's going to look like? How do you measure success? Because we have like very specific metrics. We are always collecting data. Like every month we're running reports, and we have different metrics for like productivity, retention, and things like that. So that could be a good question to ask to like get some insight into how we do that. And also, what are the opportunities for growth so that
Mhm.
you can see if this is a company that you can grow within and that you can get excited about moving forward with them. So,
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. It's always like in the questions too, they can sort of prove the research they've done, or they might ask like, well, why do you do 12 weekly visits, right? And then it's like good that they even knew that that's what we do, or why do we do the dietitian coach approach? So, or what does that entail? So being able to ask specifics there about the company also helps, just to show their enthusiasm for the role, which is great because yeah, there are a lot of opportunities that are technically the same role. We see this, it's virtual nutrition counseling where retention is important and you can work with a wide variety of people, and you can work for a lot of different companies doing that role. But when you show up to those interviews, like being able to say why this practice, why your practice specifically is going to be something I'm always, listening for. Sounds like you would too.
yeah.
So yeah. Okay, great. I know I'm just looking at our time. Emily, should I look in the chat for questions then? And then we'll have how many minutes until?
We'll go another 10. Yeah, we're good for another 10. So until 3 Central, 4 Eastern. I actually pulled the questions so I can read
Okay,
them.
thank you.
Um, this is actually interesting. And I know it's changing too. What kinds of dietitian services are covered under medical nutrition therapy?
So many. There's preventative care, which is tied to BMI. And so since we're weight inclusive, we do put that disclaimer, like we have to get your BMI in order to figure out what services are going to be covered. Because if you have a BMI over 25, then you get better coverage. And that is, I mean, most people, like they're gonna have a BMI over 25. So you will get, at least most of our clients, so they get better coverage with that. So we'll run it under preventative benefits. Definitely if you have diabetes, type 1, type 2, if you have an eating disorder, any kind of chronic condition, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, you'll get covered as well. And for some people, it just depends on your insurance. I mean, some insurance companies or plans are a lot more generous than others. So we always have to run your benefits to see, because there's different plans within the different insurance companies. So we have to like call the insurance company or go on the portal and see, like, for this specific person, how many visits do they get? And honestly, for most of our clients, I would say over 95% of them, they get unlimited visits and they come zero out of pocket. They don't have a copay or anything. So yeah.
Yeah, it does, right, depend on the plan and the state you're in and like if it's a PPO versus an HMO or whatever. But yeah, the whole reason I started the practice was because I had a health insurance plan. I'm a dietitian and I had no idea that I could get visits completely covered, like myself at a normal BMI currently. We know that doesn't matter, but like that it would cover my nutrition counseling under my preventative benefits here in Illinois. So that just like I was like, what's happening? Why is there a disconnect? Why did I not even know that as a dietitian? And this all started, I think, around like 2017, 2018 with the preventive benefits that Wendy was saying, but the virtual started like being included. And that I think was 2021 or 2020, roughly around the pandemic. So that really opened up and allowed dietitians to then reach people in multiple states or reach people that maybe couldn't come into or in rural areas, right? Like access just increased. Not to the extent that we hope it will. We hope it gets, Medicare coverage gets better. And that's why the MNT Act with the Academy has been pushed and pushed and pushed. But it's definitely more than maybe I was taught or knew about a few years ago. So pretty great.
Awesome. This next question, I think this is more pertaining for you, Wendy, for Diabetes Digital Co. Would you take on an entry-level dietitian that does not have the CDCES credential, but is looking to work towards that credential?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, most of our dietitians don't have that credential because it does take time. Like you have to build up a certain level of experience and clinical hours. So most of our dietitians don't have it, but if you're open to getting it, then I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. This is a good one and probably one that a lot of people have the same question on. I've heard that working as an inpatient dietitian, getting clinical experience is good foundation for the outpatient setting and private practice. Can you speak to that based on your experiences or maybe who you hire, looking at their experience?
You wanna start with that one, Jenny?
Sure. So the only reason, like, we'll probably, I don't know what your answer will be, Wendy, but just from my perspective, because we are, our practice is more about, like, I say that we specialize in behavior change and like coaching science, and we really like lean on that almost more than the MNT hat. We just with our referring providers, it tends to be more prevention focused, just the patients that we're getting. So like MNT isn't as applicable to them. And so because of that, the clinical isn't necessarily like a must have, or even like, sure, it's helpful, or that maybe you, like, especially if maybe you're in a really busy hospital, it tells me like, your work ethic, you're fast paced, like you feel comfortable in that, like that would be something, but it's not necessarily for my practice, like the MNT, just because we're not using it as much because of our patient population. So so it's probably, yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective, Wendy, on that.
Yeah, I think that it is an outdated approach, because before it was like kind of the prerequisite, like you have to go into clinical as much as you hated it, because that was like your initiation into becoming an RD or something. I don't think that's the case anymore. That was what I did because that was what I was told that I should do. But I think that now with the internet, with social media, there's so many different opportunities for dietitians. And I mean, for over 10 years, we had a very successful business doing like brand ambassadorship, spokesperson. Like we didn't do anything related to nutrition counseling. And I'm seeing a lot more dietitians now getting creative and doing all types of really cool things online. So, I think just kind of exploring where your interests are. And if you're not really feeling clinical, then you can do other things. You could do community, you could do like creative. I've done like a lot of writing for different food publications and things like that. So I think there's options out there.
Right. And I always say like clinical prepares you for more clinical. It's like the sooner you can get into and just start diving into one-on-one, that's going to continue to help you get better at one-on-one. But yeah, it is an outdated approach. I do think, I'll talk about this towards the end of today, but this disconnect, because we have so many people interested in the one-on-one, that might be why they got into it, but then like no experience, or like not a lot of experience in that. And then they do take that clinical job and they're like, what? Like, this is not the reality that I thought was going to be happening. So that's the point of this session, was like, well, how do we help you get into those roles that do align with what you're trying to do as a dietitian, and sooner, versus having to take those years in clinical.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
This next question is a little bit more like the day-to-day seeing patients. How many patients per day is reasonable for both full-time or part-time, and where do you fit in charting, and like how long are you charting per patient, kind of just like managing that time, which may be more so your employees than yourself.
Mhm. For us, we have a goal currently of for full-time 28 to 30 weekly clients, and we do allow admin time. But it's also caked into the hour sessions. So technically the sessions have to be 53 minutes, and then you have like 7 extra minutes to do whatever it is. But we also give them more than enough admin time to be able to like finish up their notes and communicate with clients, like if they have to message them or anything like that. What about you, Jenny?
Yeah, it's very similar. I love the 53-minute, very efficient way to do it. And she's saying that because of well, for various reasons, to be able to have space in between. So you're not going like back to back, like I have a 2, a 3, a 4, that's hard to do. But also, yeah, even just for billing purposes, that's a good number to hit. But I would say the only other metric I would add to that is, generally we will say like 15 minutes max, if not 10 minutes max, on admin time per hour of client sessions. And we initially like tried out doing shorter sessions, like 30-minute, 45-minute sessions, but very quickly realized that was going to be much harder from an admin and charting time for a dietitian. While we'd like to see more people, it just wasn't going to make sense in terms of just the dietitian's day to day. Having instead of say, for example, like it's 5 hours of patients, it could be 5 patients or 10 or 7 or 8 if it's a shorter visit. That's more admin, more like lifts on patient care. So yeah, so we land in that 1 hour range as well. And then similar idea, the 25 to 27 for us, but most of our employees are hourly minus those 3. So it's more like, it's less about like hitting that and more about just, yeah, trying to fill up their schedule with patients we bring in. So.
Awesome. And then one more question on just like your employees. Are your dietitians contractors or employees with benefits? And then kind of tagging onto the question about like how many calls are reasonable, are the call sessions monitored? So 2-part question there, contractors or employees with benefits, and then do you monitor / do virtual private practices typically monitor those calls, or are they recorded in any way?
You could go, Jen.
Okay, I'll go ahead. We don't record the calls. I'm just too nervous with HIPAA. I don't think yeah, I just would be too, I haven't explored it enough. I know there's like AI solutions out there. So there could be something that where those recordings are hosted in a HIPAA compliant platform. We don't have that set up yet, so we do not record anything. We will have our lead dietitian sit in on sessions quarterly with all the dietitians, and in particular the new hires, so that they can be able to observe and supervise those sessions. But then the other question, they are definitely employees. And the main rule there is that we're training them. And so because we're training them and we're asking for specific shifts from them, then Department of Labor, that's how I'm operating, is that it's pretty clear that they'd have to be employees, at least in Illinois. So that's how we operate.
Yeah, same. It's too much of a risk because technically if they have like a schedule, then they're considered employees. So we take on the same approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then basic benefits and like following labor laws, which cover a certain amount of PTO for hourly employees, and unpaid leave that's available in their job would continue to be there. So things like that, we will do our best. And I think just being a growing practice, it's like we do the best we can while we're growing, and then hope to add more benefits as we can. I know that's kind of a struggle sometimes.
Exactly. But yeah, the labor laws vary by state. So you would really have to see. We go with California since that's where we established the business, and most of our dietitians are in California, and they have very strict labor laws. I'm in New York and they're a lot more flexible, but we kind of just default to that. But if you're thinking about starting private practice, it would be good to like consult with the HR lawyer and just make sure that all of that is squared away so that you don't get sued.
Right. The fun of group practice, yes, getting sued. But yeah, no, that's super helpful. Emily, were there any other questions? Or is that...
No, and we're actually at time. We're gonna go into a little break, but thank you so much, Wendy, and on Jenny too, for all of this insight here. Lots of great questions, obviously, that came through, and really helpful for those either applying or maybe wanting to start their own practice. That was a really great session.
Thank you for having us. This was great.
Thanks, Wendy.
Bye.